All right, Gary, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and let's get started.
There we go, finally. Let's see, let me set up the share here. I'm not enabled yet.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself while you're doing that.
Okay.
And then I'll set up.
I'm Gary Evans, Fort Wayne, Indiana. The background picture is my railroad nowhere line working to be near someplace. Notice the use of the letters. I can see a couple of smiles there. And I intend to do this through PowerPoint when I can do the sharing. Eric, I'm trying to share, but it's still saying I'm disabled.
Go ahead, Gary.
Ah, there we go. Okay. Good. Can you see my PowerPoint presentation?
Yep, it looks good. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay. This is, as I said, Gary Evans, Fort Wayne, Indiana. I finished this presentation about a couple of weeks ago, but so it's been in the can for a while. I'm talking about operations on the nowhere line working to be near someplace. This car is my poster child. During the first couple of sessions, my crew hated this thing. I said, read the reporting marks, not the logo, but this gives the story. We all know Norfolk and Western merged and became Norfolk Southern. Okay, at 13 by 17, my railroad is a small or medium-sized layout. And in case you're interested, I'm looking at a second screen, so that's where I'll be reading my stuff. I consider it, yeah, small or medium-sized layout. It's around the walls. There's an upper-level branch on it. It's double and single track main line, serves a generic Midwest region. It's designed and built as an intensive switching layout. In a room that small, I cannot run 40-foot trains, no way possible. I run traditional mixed freight service with museum excursions. Museum excursions are my passenger service. It's HO scale, Digitrax DCC. I can keep 5 to 6 people busy for 3.5 hours. Regular operations are fourth Thursday of the month, except November and December. Something about conflicting with holidays during November and December. I am running signals by spreadsheet, which drive the operational signals on the layout. And I started with, and then returned to car cards with waybills. I did take a little side trip through JMRI, and I don't think it's applicable and works for my small layout. So being a retired software engineer, I said I can do something about that. I designed a custom-built software that assigns destinations to the cars. Let's see, what are signals by spreadsheet? It's a software package that there's a digital I/O board that connects up to the Digitrax LocoNet, and it connects to the computer by USB.
That's Jerry Alber's system, correct?
Jerry Alber's system. Jerry and I have talked quite a bit at conventions. He knows who I am. I know who he is. I've been on his layout. So the system works. Okay, briefly.
Oh, and by the way, Gary, we'll go through all the questions at the end. No need to interrupt what you're doing.
Okay.
Time. We'll just keep a log and we'll go through them when you're done.
Okay.
So go ahead.
This is a schematic of the railroad. I have an area called Loop, which is my staging area. If you want to think Chicago Loop area, but there's no way I'm attempting downtown Chicago. 3 staging tracks, which during restaging out of the side of the session, I do fiddling and move the cars around. Heading east on the railroad comes to the largest yard on the railroad, Big Berg. not Big Bird, as a lot of my crew likes to call it. This continues a double line around to Midland, halfway through the room. At Midland, most mainline trains cross over and leave on track 2. Slope is an area where there's some local industry, and the reason it's called slope is because the main line does have an incline to it. There is very little track space for doing a flat switching up there. You need hill brakes. Continuing around through the tunnel, so this could be considered Appalachian Mountains, come back through Smallville, back to Midland on track 2, through Big Bird, and back to Loop or Chicago. So basically, next slide, I like to do a concept called linearize the railroad. A train has to start someplace, do some work, and go someplace else. That's what operations basically means. So by taking my railroad, freight traffic starts and ends in Loop. It comes out on the main, which is the double track main, and at Midland, we cross over and it becomes single track main to run around through the tunnel, through Smallville, back to Midland, and go back. So that's freight traffic. Passenger traffic in the form of excursion trains run from branch out, and there are sufficient ways with Ys and whatever else that the branch or the passenger trains can run any way around the railroad and turn themselves to go back into the branch yard. And branch obviously also has industrial trackage all along here. Okay, so in Loop, the trains are staged early in the morning, ready for the day. And as I said, there was no way I was going to attempt downtown Chicago as my representation of the Loop. So might want to consider this Hammond, Gary, Michigan City, a smaller town, if you will, along the track, and older. We could also call this Tycoville because that's where the kits came from. But it's basically an urban area, and then way back in here is where the tracks come around to form the Loop area. Okay, in talking to my crew, trying to figure out if I'm satisfying them because they keep coming back, so they must like something. So the main points that I have discovered, my crew wants to have fun. They want to meet the other crew members and discuss trains. So that's basically what we do for every session that we have. A lot of them say also they want me to give them challenges for operations. And others say, well, we want to move as many trains and cars as possible. Well, in this small layout, possible becomes available. But during a general session, we will move just about every car that's on the railroad. And importantly, for my car card and waybill scheme, my crew can still read HO reporting marks, even referring back to my poster card car on the front leading slide with the different reporting marks. The crew really does not care about the carload status or the history of where the car has been. But I, as the layout owner, like to simulate loaded cars, empty cars, and keep track because certain industries, like the grain elevator, accepts only empty cars and they ship out loaded. We'll get into that a little bit more. Several of the crew, when we have a meeting, I ask who wants to be yard master. Most of them, I don't want to be the yard master. Too many trains arrive too soon. We have a few who love to do yard masters. Who wants to be dispatcher? I get the same story. I end up usually being the dispatcher, or I call it traffic manager. Sometimes crew says, does this move really make sense? Why can't I do it sooner? And then we get into a discussion of my train sequences and what I'm trying to accomplish in moving freight. But bottom line, they're here to have fun. Occasionally, I will have a comment about scenery, equipment, or whatever. but most importantly, there's always the thank you to me from them as an opportunity to play with trains. So my job descriptions. My traffic manager is the mother in Mother May I. Basically, it's an informal dispatcher, and responsibilities are to monitor and direct all traffic-related activities. This includes crew assignments, meets of trains, priority of what train or which move gets handled, and decisions if we have enough crew that we want to run some excursion trains. Number two, the yard crew for Big Berg does require 2 persons. Big Berg consists of the major yard plus a sub yard to which is attached a transportable time saver module. The time saver becomes a 5 industrial sites in a compact area. It's not prototypical, but the crew likes playing with the puzzles there. I need a crew for Smallville. Smallville has a couple of local spots within the yard area. And then there are 3 industries out on the main line. So Smallville has to make the appropriate trains and ship the cars out. If I have sufficient crew, we'll put a yard master up in Branch, and it handles the local freight and the excursions. If I don't have enough crew, then the Branch job just falls to each train that goes in and out of town. And then train crews as available. And we operate with clearance forms instead of just handing out a timetable and say, go at it. And the clearance form contains all the information that the crew needs to operate over the railroad. Identification, departure time, origin destination, train blocking, any notes, the routing with times, and the maximum train lengths for the track. And this is supplied on a 1/2 size clipboard with a railroad map. And I have paper clips attached to the clipboard for holding car cards and waybills. So they don't have to walk around with all of this loose paperwork. Everything is bundled together. And for those of you familiar with JMRI, which I did run for a while on my railroad, this clearance form looks pretty much like a manifest that JMRI will generate. Gives you the information on the name, the routing, times, and any other notes on it. What's not on this form is the cars that are in the consist of your train, because I'm still using car cards and waybills. But this serves the equivalent of what the routing and the manifest does in JMRI. An overview picture of Big Berg, and it's not very big. It has a certain capacity of cars that we try to keep the number of cars here reasonable so that the yard master can get his work done. And here's an industry back here, there's an industry, and then there's another industry over here. And then down behind the camera is where the time saver and another sub yard is connected to it. And the track right here is part of the engine lead and the track connecting the 2 yards together. Okay, car forwarding system. As I said, I have tried JMRI, and I ran into problems because JMRI needs to know when a car is released from a train. In other words, when a car goes to a yard, you have to tell the computer that it made it there. And my layout is not big enough to handle that. So we still need the car cards and waybills. The immediacy of carrying the paperwork allows the yard masters and train crews to decide when and where they're going to switch various cars. The paperwork, which you can see here, the car card and waybill, is generated by my custom developed software. And importantly, almost all of the fascia on the railroad is J-channel to keep the paperwork off the layout. To see car cards lying around with your scenery is scary to a layout owner. So I have tried to provide J-channel at the front and sufficient depth to hold the cards, and you can still see the trains. Our usual rules: when a car is delivered to a destination, the paperwork is turned inward so that we know that it's done. The software matches the cars to the lengths of the spots. So there are no off spots in my scheme. Every car is assigned to a place in which it can fit. And then to restage, I take the single-sided waybills out of the car card pockets, and then I match them to other car cards that's based on a report that the software generates. So I don't have two-sided, four-sided rotating waybills. Single-sided, matching with a single car card. So let's compare my car destination software with JMRI. Realizing car destinations is oriented toward the whole session, JMRI is oriented to trains. I run several trains during my session. So car destinations has rolling stock. It builds a list of cars. JMRI has operations, building the list of cars. I have something called railroad geography, defining the physical characteristics of the spots, and that in JMRI is under operations locations. Car requests, we define what car types are to serve which spots, and JMRI does that locations edit. Reconciliation, that's where we configure the software to match the car locations after the session movement. Now here's the difference. JMRI does this when you terminate a train. So I do sessions, JMRI does trains. Destinations, basically the same thing. Assign destinations of cars, and JMRI does that trains when you build a train. Paperwork, my software will print car cards, waybills, or a combination of destination cards. Destination cards are single use, but also on one piece of paper. And JMRI does the operations, trains, build, generate their paperwork. We both software packages have tools for support stuff. JMRI has settings, locomotives, and routes. I never used locomotives in JMRI. I do not now. And routes, I accomplished that with my clearance cards for each train that goes out. Okay, so car destination software, it is intended for small to intermediate size layouts where the owner keeps track of origin and destination details. I don't think I would recommend this to somebody who's trying to run 500 cars per session. That's a lot of stuff. It does require verification of each car's delivery. Then the car is made available for reuse. But it's not concerned about how or when the car is delivered. If there is no delivery verification at the end of the session, the destination for that car does not change. We do not change the waybill and the car card, and we wait until next session. And this multi-session feature matches the nowhere line operations very well. If something doesn't get delivered, no big deal. It will sit wherever it is, and it will eventually get there. A few technical sides. Car destinations is written in Visual Basic for applications inside an Excel workbook. It is macro, which is embedded code. So some older virus apps will actually kill it. It will delete the file. So as I said, source code is embedded in the file and accessible by the user. This is not modern technology. It's probably about 15 years old, but it works. It gives the user access to the source code. And this software was not a weekend hack. There are about 21,000 source lines of code in there. As I said, I'm a retired software engineer. This is a real product. It's available for email transfer if anybody's interested in having a copy. And it does have a built-in starter demo railroad if you want to configure it to its basics, lowest basics, and then build your own railroad on top of it. So a few metrics. I have 30 car types. I do not use the AAR reporting letters. So I will have a boxcar, general purpose boxcar. I have some boxcars that are assigned for food service, other boxcars that are kept clean because they are plug door, and some boxcars that actually carry and are dedicated to wood and paper products. Through my collection of cars, I have 66 road names. I have 4 managed yards, 34 managed spots, and right now there are 116 cars in the software, 100 of which are actually used in a session. So as I had said, small to medium size where the user is willing to track where the cars actually go. And so what is the upper limit on this software? I don't know. One thing I do know is that I do have 6,121 feet available for spot and yard capacity in my railroad. And with my current loading, 5,000 some feet of that are used. So I have 18% free space. And I think I once read someplace that a model railroad should have in the range of 20% free space in order to do the moves at all the various locations. The software sets up by default 50% of the yard space is used for storage. So what this means is, suppose you have yard A and you say that yard A is 750 feet long. Okay, you enter that total length into the software. At first, it's going to say half of 750 feet is storage and half is for actual switching moves. And then as you use the software, you can adjust that ratio up and down. I do have 1 yard where it's in an area that has a lot of lead track around it. 100% of that yard is used for storage. It's just a way that I came up with the idea of keeping things variable.
Hey, Gary.
Yes.
All right. We're running out of time, but we do have a few questions if we can put those up.
Okay. Yeah.
First question from Wayland. Do your crews have problems with holding trains outside the yard, or does the yard crew move unlike prototype to get the trains in?
I run with a timetable. I will run a 1-to-1 clock, and it's based upon the work that the yard masters need to get done.
Okay.
So I don't overload with mainline trains. I let
All
the
right.
yard masters make them up and get them out and bring them in.
And a follow-up question from him, what's the longest reach for coupling, uncoupling? I guess in terms of how far do you have to reach to get to it?
One of my older sections, you do have to stand on a stool to reach pretty far back to the one siding in the branch line. That was a mistake. The more modern areas, it's no more than about 30 inches back.
All right. Thomas Gazier, and Thomas, I'm sorry, I apologize if I'm screwing your name up. Clearance form lists maximum car capacity for trains. How do you handle excess cars if more than train is allowed to move?
The train crews are authorized to reject cars at a yard.
Got it. There's a question about the J channel. I sent a picture of J channel, but can you flip back to that slide real quick? So I think that comes up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that J channel is that sort of brownish piece there.
Right.
It's just a piece of plastic. If you go search for J channel plastic molding, there's hundreds of options out there for the people who are wondering. Do you
And in
use
another place on the layout, I've used some old exterior vinyl siding pieces.
that would work too?
Yes.
Do you reuse trains during the same session after they arrive in staging?
Once the trains have arrived in staging, that is their destination. No, they stay there.
Okay. And Al Dowman's asking, how much variety or variation does the operating scheme have from one session to another? Same trains every session, or a handful of different sessions that rotate?
Total variability.
Okay.
If I could talk to this slide.
Yeah, if you want to run through that real quick, we've got a couple
Yes.
of minutes.
Okay. This is the cycle for a grain hopper. So the software will generate a waybill for each 40-foot length. Indiana Northern Grain Hopper 2009 is 54 feet long, and it is one of 9 on the railroad. So let's assume that this grain hopper has been loaded at Farmers Union Co-op, which has space for 203 feet. It's going to have 5 waybills, but actually can hold only 3 cars. So it accepts the grain elevator, accepts empty grain hopper cars and plug door box cars. Since it's a work spot, it swaps the load swaps the output to be loaded. So load handling, a work spot swaps from empty to load or load to swap, empty. Hold spots and yards do not change the load status. In session 1, if there are 3 cars, those cars will come on the grain train and go to Big Berg Yard. Some of them may go up to the branch yard, or some of them may go on freight east-west, which is mainline train and other trains, and will be taken to loop staging, various online industrial spots, or the interchange track. These are all work spots. So once the car is ready to leave there, it is emptied. During session 2, the empty cars are picked up and they may be brought by the freight east-west or other trains to Big Berg Yard, or they may be brought to a hold spot. Then in session 3, the grain train starts at Big Berg Yard, picks up some from the Time Saver Yard 2, and runs them out to Farmers Union as empties. Cycle then repeats. I have cycles like this running for hopper cars, tank cars, food box cars, and grain hoppers. So there's so much variability, and the software uses random numbers, that no 2 sessions are ever alike. We run the same trains, we use the same timetable schedule, but the consists and the switching are different every time.
Got it. And then we'll make this the last question. What versions of Excel, or what version do you need in order to run that VBA? I've lost track. I mean, I don't think it'll run in the Office 365 version, will it?
I am running subscription Microsoft 365 service. I'm keeping mine very much up to date, and yes, it is definitely supported.
Okay, it'll run in the installed version of Office 365, not the online version.
That I'm not aware of.
Okay. I don't think the web version will run VBA, but I believe if you install it, it will. So
yes, right, yeah.
Okay. Well, I've put up a link to your page on operatingsessions.com with all of your PDFs and so on.
Okay.
And people can get in touch with you for your slide deck if you want. If you want people to email you, I'll let you decide if you want to put your email into the chat, and they can contact you for the file.
Does the chat end up on YouTube?
The chat does not end up on YouTube, no. The chat basically disappears at the end of the session.
Okay, because I don't want my email on YouTube.
No.
But I can throw that into chat.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much, Gary. We appreciate you presenting.
Okay.
All right. So next we're going to go to Bob Rodriguez. I'll find him here. And let's see, we go. Switch over to Bob here. All right, Bob, if you've got, there you go.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, go ahead, Bob.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Glad to be here. I'm Bob Rodriguez. I'm in Dumfries, Virginia. My railroad is a freelance rail line situated in the Allegheny Mountains of Pennsylvania called the Nickel City Line. Just a little bit, and I'm going to do this real quick, but my layout's about 22 by 38 feet. It's triple deck with three staging yards, a main yard. I operate in the period of 1999. I use Digitrax DCC with UR91 and UR92 radios. In-person sessions run between 9 and 12 people, but COVID-19 has changed all of that. So I'm speaking to you from the dispatch center of the NCL. So you can see the dispatchers panel behind me. And what I'm going to do today is talk a little more in detail about how I do remote operations. There's a number of people out there that are doing remote operations in various forms. And, I'm still learning about this. I'm figuring it out. I'm talking to a lot of people. So I'm just going to share with you how I set it up on my layout. And hopefully that's going to spur some ideas for if you're considering that or want to try something a little different. So basically this started in 2016. I got the idea. I operated on Dave Abley's layout. Beautiful layout, but one of the things that really caught my eye was his dispatcher wasn't even anywhere in the house. His dispatcher was dispatching from, I believe, Philadelphia. And so I struck up a conversation with Dave. He gave me a lot of valuable information on how to do that. Afterwards, I kind of played with it a little bit, but I didn't really get too much involved in that. But when COVID-19 hit and all of our events and op sessions, everything started getting shut down, it was an opportunity for me to really look at remote operations. So I started looking at my layout, started configuring it, talking to Dave, talking to a couple of other people about how to do this. And did a number of sessions starting in May. And to this date, I've done about 13 remote sessions so far. So the way I'm going to do the presentation today is I've got a short 15-minute video that really lays out how I set it up. Afterwards, since I'm using an iPad, I'm going to walk you really quickly through the room so you can see how the cameras are set up, how the computers are set up, and then I'm happy to answer any questions at that time. So without further ado, Eric, if you want to go ahead and start that video, that'd be great.
All righty, will do.
Hello everybody. Today I'm going to talk about remote operations and how I use it on my own layout, the Nickel City Line.
Everybody hear the audio?
In today's brief presentation, we're going to be going over the software and hardware requirements for the layout, connecting the layout.
Hold on a second. Okay. All right, here we go again.
To the internet, viewing the layout, schedule changes and adjustments for remote operations, advanced paperwork and information sent to our operators, setting up the remote operations session, and running the remote operations session. So let's get to it. High-speed internet connection. A PC or Mac computer with a good-sized monitor, preferably 2 monitors, a microphone and headset for the computer, a webcam, which is optional, Zoom conference software for radio communications and layout viewing, Team Viewer conferencing software, which allows the dispatcher and yardmaster to access and control those consoles. A separate iPhone, iPad, Android, or tablet that can be used as a throttle using either the Engine Driver Throttle app for Android telephones or the Wii Throttle app for iPhones and iPads. Layout requirements for remote operations includes digital command control system that can handle control of turnouts, block detection, optional signal control, and an interface software such as Java Model Railroad Interface or JMRI. In this example, we have our layout. The first thing we do is connect the DCC command station to the layout, which provides power and a digital signal to our locomotives. Next, we add a turnout motor and a DCC turnout controller, which is connected to the DCC system and operated through the DCC network. Next, we add block detection, which requires placing rail gaps between the different monitored segments of the layout. Each gap is wired into a DCC block detection decoder, which sends its messages back to the DCC command station, letting the user know whether the block is occupied or unoccupied. On the Nickel City line, I use the following equipment as a foundation for remote operations. My preference is Digitrax. However, there are plenty of other great manufacturers of digital control systems out there, and the choice is really up to you. But for me, I use the Digitrax DCS-100 command station, DB210 boosters for supplemental power control, SE8C signal decoders for turnout and signal control. For block detection, I use BDL 168s, and for overcurrent protection, I use Digitrax PM4s. Two computers control the functions of the Nickel City line layout. The main computer serves as the dispatcher's computer. The second computer controls all functions within the main yard at Nickel City. I use the JMRI software to communicate between each computer and the DCC command station using a local buffer USB manufactured by Railroad Circuits. The local buffer connects between the dispatcher's computer and the DCC command station. The JMRI software sends and receives commands and messages between the PCs and the DCC layout. The yard computer, which is also using JMRI, is connected to the dispatcher's computer through the home computer network and sends and receives JMRI messages and commands through the dispatcher's computer using JMRI's LocoNet over TCP protocols. All communications between either computer run through the single local buffer USB. Let's turn to how a guest operator can connect to the NCL layout over the internet. The first thing guest operators need to have is the IPv4 external address of the layout host's router and the port assignment for the JMRI throttles on the layout. The layout host will provide this information to each guest in advance of a remote operations session. In order for someone to connect to the host layout remotely, the operator must provide the external IPv4 address of their router to the host. The external IPv4 address is how the internet knows where to send and receive data from, sort of like your home address. To obtain your external address, simply open your web browser and type in, "What is my IPv4 address?" The search results will usually provide both the IPv4 and IPv6 results for your router. If you want to know your mobile device's address, simply turn off the Wi-Fi on the mobile device and then open a browser on the device and follow the instructions I just mentioned. Your IPv4 address is needed by the layout host so they can allow you access to the JMRI ports and through their firewall. If you are the layout host, You can contact your internet service provider for instructions on how to do this on your home router. Once the layout host has cleared the guest devices through the router and firewall, they can select locomotives on their throttle apps to operate on the layout over the internet. Now let's discuss how we can view the layout remotely. On the NCL layout, I use a mixture of USB webcams, an iPad, and an iPhone to provide remote operators with views of about 80 to 85% of the layout over Zoom conferencing software. I use a 3D printer to create tripod mounts for the iPhone and iPad, and ceiling camera mounts and cable clips for the USB webcams. In the layout room, I have 4 computers and a laptop that push out video from 1 to 3 cameras. In order for a PC to push out multiple webcams as a single camera feed, I use an open source software package called Open Broadcast Software, or OBS. OBS allows me to set up my camera feeds in much the same way as a TV studio pushes video out from a news studio. My multi-camera feeds include 2 window stationary and multi-window sequential scenes. I also use OBS to push out the dispatcher's screen as 6 close-up sequential windows, which aid my remote operators in tracking their train's progress. In order for a guest to control the dispatcher's console remotely, I use TeamViewer software. TeamViewer allows a guest to log directly into the computer and take control of its functions. From the guest's computer, it appears as if the dispatcher software is running on their own PC, and they have full control of all functions as if they were physically present in the layout room. The last item I want to touch on is the use of train cams. I have started to build some experimental train cams using a Raspberry Pi 0W with camera, a 5-volt power pack, 3D printed mounting brackets, and a deep well container car. I am piping these videos through the JMRI web server. So far, the train cam views have received great reviews from my remote operators. In order for remote operations to be successful, I had to adjust my operating scheme to accommodate the logistics of each session. Normally, I operate with 9 to 12 operators, but for remote operations, I started with 3, a dispatcher and 2 engineers. As I brought more operators online, I added a 3rd engineer, and eventually a 4th. At this point in time, with myself as the sole occupant in the layout room, 5 remote operators per session is sufficient. Sessions were reduced from my normal 4-hour session to 1.5 to 2 hours. I also eliminated the time-based schedule and went to sequential operations, moving a number of trains into new positions to accommodate remote ops. I also eliminated the use of the fast clock. The number of trains run per session was reduced from 14 to between 4 and 6 trains. Local trains were limited to 1 per session. Extra passenger and freight trains were eliminated. Track warrants and the use of my equipment defect detector were canceled. At the present time, the yard position is not operated remotely. These changes are necessary since I am the only one in the room serving as the train master, yard master, brakeman, conductor, and chief gandy dancer. Prior to each session, I provide a number of documents to my remote operators which aid them in performing their work. The operators have access to crew assignments, switch lists, train routing diagrams, remote ops instructions, and camera locations. I also provide a number of supplemental documents about the layout, including a track plan and track schematic, dispatcher instructions, and other reference materials to help everyone feel comfortable in a remote environment. All these documents are available online on my Layouts website. When setting up the remote ops session, I make sure that I send out all the read-ahead documents, crew assignments, and login info several days in advance. I also do a complete layout cleaning and check of all equipment, electrical components, and locomotives. I run each train at least once or twice prior to the session and correct any deficiencies. I test all computers and hardware fully at least a day before the session and address any issues. For the session, I keep copies of key documents handy for reference. I power up the layout and all systems approximately 2 hours prior to the session. I start the Zoom meeting 1 hour prior and set up all the layout cameras and train cams. One computer serves as the Zoom host. The other computers simply join the meeting. The host computer also provides the connection between the two-way FRS radio and the audio for the Zoom meeting. I use a Dingotel USB audio adapter to make the connection between the FRS radio and the computer. The Dingotel adapter switches the microphone and audio output functions from the radio into the computer, allowing the mic function of the computer to access the speaker function of the radio and vice versa. FRS radio is set to the Vox function and operates in that mode in order to transmit across the radio network and communicate with the other remote operators on Zoom. I have all remote systems running at least 30 minutes prior to the session. As operators and dispatchers log in, approximately 15 minutes prior to the start of the session, I have them connect their throttles to the layout and make sure that we don't have any technical issues. If all goes well, and we still have time remaining before the start of the session, everyone has a chance to socialize a bit and get reacquainted and talk about what they're doing in the model railroad world. At the start of the session, everyone mutes their microphone and only unmutes them when they need to transmit. When the session starts, the train master or traffic supervisor will call the crews on duty and then hand them off to the dispatcher. As the host, I monitor the progress and make suggestions when needed to improve efficiency of the session. I also assist with switching operations as needed. And finally, at the conclusion, I hold a short wrap-up where everybody can talk about the session, any improvements needed, or what they really enjoyed about it. Now let's take a brief glimpse at a remote operating session on the NCL.
Take it back another car length over. Brakeman 502T to engineer, go ahead and hold right there. We're in the clear. I'm realigning track 2. And we're good there. We can sit there for a minute.
Roger, holding here, 502T engineer.
NCL 421 answering dispatch, over.
421, you'll be happy to know that we now can have you depart Nichols City Yard over to Shepherdsfield. And in Shepherdsfield, we're going to line you up for main 2 in Shepherdsfield. You have an Amtrak coming in the other direction, which will be on track 1. Over.
NCL 421, Roger, line to Shepherdsfield, track number 2, waiting for Amtrak.
Copy that.
Dispatcher, this is Amtrak 650. I'm just pulling into Shepherdsfield.
I have you on my board. Thank you, Amtrak 650. And I'm going to need you to hold there because I've got another train extra of 421 coming at you the other way.
Here are a couple of final thoughts concerning remote operations. Try to hold as many sessions as you can so that crews can become comfortable with the remote operating format. It is quite different from regular operating sessions, and the more you do, the better they'll be at it. Keep the sessions fun and interesting. Keep the sessions at no more than 2 hours. I've found that this is generally as long as anyone wants to stay in front of a computer. Don't be afraid to seek out advice on remote operations. I certainly did, and I don't claim to be one who knows everything about how this is done. And while what I do works for me, it may not work exactly for you. But hopefully, I've inspired some new thoughts and ways of thinking about how you might accomplish remote operations on your layout. And finally, don't be afraid to take a risk. I found remote operations has become very enjoyable the more we do it and the more we play around with the format. Both my operators and I enjoy getting together a couple of times a week and running some trains, switching some industries, and just having a general good time. It's a great way to make the best of the current situation that we're in. I thank you for your time. This has been my presentation on remote operations on the NCL, and I thank you very much for watching.
Okay, so I'm going to spin this camera around and I'll give you a quick tour. So we're going to go into the main layout room here. And first thing you'll see is that I have several cameras mounted up on the ceiling with my 3D brackets. There are my cable clips that will take everything down to the first, which is a laptop. And on the laptop, I'm actually using the webcam on the laptop computer as well as 2 USB cameras. So there's a second USB camera right there. So that one captures everything over here. And then this one captures this entire view over here. As you go around into the main layout area, I have another computer that kind of sits here. I have 3 cameras posted on this computer. So the first camera is up here on the ceiling, and that kind of covers this whole area right in here. My second camera is mounted up here, and that kind of points over towards Bristow, so my operators can see both Bristow and the level below. And then the other camera is right over there on the ceiling. That tends to capture this view of Hanover and a little bit below as you exit Nickel City. All these mounting brackets were 3D printed from my 3D printer. And then I'm going to take you around real quick to the other part of the layout room and just kind of show you when I throw this together at the first time, I was just using whatever I could. And here's a classic example. That's a curtain rod hanger that this camera's mounted on. I just happened to have it in my hardware junk drawer, and I had some duct tape, and you know duct tape, it works great. So that, a little bit of painter's tape, and it works just fine. When you come into the other room right here, I don't have it set up right now, but normally I have a tripod sitting on this table, which then captures this view of the layout. So you can catch the upper deck at Du Bois and the lower deck of Carthus. I also have an older computer here set up for Zoom, which has a camera that catches the west end of Du Bois. It's just mounted right here on a tripod, and it's capturing this view right here. And then if I proceed into the yard area, I have couple of cameras here. So the yard computer, this is what they capture from the yard. That camera is mounted up there. And then I have another camera that's just mounted right up on top of the locomotive maintenance shed. And this computer right here actually catches that camera that we just saw earlier with the curtain rod hook. So it captures Du Bois West and Carthus. And as you can see, this is the OBS software. So I can put labels over top of the OBS over the graphics or the video. And that really helps people get their bearings on what they want to see. The other thing I have here is I have a couple of hubs for Ethernet to help push out the video to the computers. The two-way radio is right there plugged into the Dingotel adapter. And then besides those two, all those computers, I supplement with an iPad and an iPhone to kind of cover my dead spots. In addition to that, I'm going to switch back over here real quick. So we started using my mock-up of a train cam. So basically, this is just a deep well container car I've got a Raspberry Pi 0W with a camera on the front end of it, and I'm using Raspberry Pi webcam software, which just turns the camera on right away, and I'm piping that into my JMRI internal web screen, which people will be able to access through port forwarding. And so they can just select up which camera. So I have 3 cameras right now. I'm working on a 4th. And basically with the train crew assignments and the schedules that I give them, I also give them a camera assignment. And that camera stays with them the whole session. When they switch trains, I just go over, I pick that camera up, I'm gonna move it over to the next train. So they always have a trackside view in addition to all of the webcams that I have. At first it was a little rough to start off with, but we've been doing enough of these sessions now that the precision of the operations is just incredible. I've actually, in several of these sessions, just stood back against the wall and watched 4 trains operating without my interaction whatsoever, hearing the engineers talking to each other, knowing that they're watching all the cameras, and just the precision between the dispatcher and the crews is just, it's just amazing. I just do rail fanning sometimes. So, and this is the, basically the DingoTel adapter. So it's just a little tiny USB. This thing is not in production anymore, but you can still find them on eBay. And basically, I just use a regular FRS radio. Take the jack, plug it right into the top of the radio, right here. And then this goes right into the computer and it becomes your mic and your audio outfeed. Just make sure that the radio is set to Vox. Now, the question can be, well, why don't you just use Zoom like everybody else? Well, the big problem for me is that I'm retasking my cell phone and my iPad to the layout. So in order for me to walk around and communicate with everybody, I have to use the 2-way radio. It's just one of the limitations that I have. So that is my down and dirty presentation on how I do remote ops on the NCL. And I'm happy to answer any questions I can.
All right. To the people who, can you hear me, Bob?
Yes, I can.
Okay. To the people who are wondering, I threw a link to the YouTube video that we showed that's in the chat. And I'll just work through the questions. From Al Dowman, have you found out a way for trains to do any limited work? Are remote crews able to set out or pick up a block of cars with your assistance to uncouple?
Yes.
Most of us don't like uncoupling magnets, but that might allow some remote setouts and pickups.
Well, no, I don't have any remote uncoupling capability, but what I do through scheduling is I make sure that only one local train is scheduled per session so that I can adequately couple and uncouple that train with and instruct the locomotive. So I basically become the brake.
Yep. I think,
and then also through scheduling, if I have other trains that are due for the yard because of sequential operations, I schedule those after the local is done so that I can go over to the yard and then act as the yard master.
yep. I think in general with the local type trains, you essentially need one pair of boots on the ground per local. There's just no other way to do it. You know, the long hauls where you really don't have any stops, those, as you said, as long as they've got cameras and they can see where they're going, you can have kind of, I would say unlimited, but you're less limited there. So,
right. The other thing I'd add, Eric, is eventually I'll probably have one more person in the room, and when I do that, then I can open up the yard master's console for a remote yard master with a brakeman in the yard, and then that opens up even more opportunities.
Exactly. Let's say there's a question here that the dispatcher is throwing switches through JMRI via the Digitrax hardware, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
There was a question about the DingoTel adapter. I threw a link out to the old Amazon page. As I said, you're going to have to look if you go out and search for like FRS USB adapter, about the only options out there are either finding a used one, or as you said, there is a Zoom client for phones. So
Yes.
if you've got an extra phone, then that's your radio. The one nice thing about the thing Bob's got is if you do have people in the room, well, then everybody's listening to the same information. So let's say Bob or John Hansky's asking, where did you get your cameras? And it looks like you've got a whole mix of cameras there, including some Raspberry Pis.
Right. I didn't spend a lot of money on cameras. I basically went to Newegg, and they had a bunch of $15 cameras, and then I bought some more when I got some more computers. One of my operators is an IT guy, and he's actually upgrading his computers. And so when we started this project, he said, you know, I'll wipe these computers because I'm not going to use them anymore. I'll drop them off at your front door, and they'll already be ready to go. So he donated 3 computers to me, which has allowed me to push out all the video that I'm pushing out.
Yep. I think the Raspberry Pis seem pretty promising because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, those can actually act as video servers, you know, if you have an IP to connect to.
Right.
And
right.
so
they
if
do
you,
it all.
Yeah, they do everything. So that eliminates the need for the PC. So
Right.
I was trying it out on my layout, and it's like the sheer number of cameras you need to have good. I love the in-train camera. I think that would be outstanding, especially when you've got signals. So,
Right.
okay. How many cameras total do you have?
Right now I have, let's see, I've got it on my sheet because I knew I wouldn't remember that. Right now I have a total of 11 cameras, web cameras. And then on top of that, I add the iPad and the iPhone.
Plus the mobile, or do you have the, is that card?
Okay. Then you got to add the mobile the web, the train cams, which is, will eventually be 4.
Okay. All right. Yeah. What's your upstream bandwidth there? That was a question.
All right. And I did that based on one of the previous presentations. I took a look. My download speed is 60 megabytes per second, and my upload speed is actually 6 megabytes per second. And I have not had any issues pumping out all this video and train cams and communications. It's, you know, and that includes when I do an evening session and everybody else is home and they're streaming upstairs or gaming or something like that. So right now, knock on wood, you know, my system seems to be able to handle it pretty well.
Well, and I think the fact that you're using the OBS to essentially aggregate a lot of those cameras, I think that, I mean, if you start trying 5, 6, 7 Zoom streams, that's going to be, that would simply be too much. But having that one way to get the cameras out, I think that cuts it back. All right.
And OBS is a great tool. I mean, I just love it because I can have 3 cameras on one PC and put it in a nice format that at least my operators appreciate.
Yep. Do you have an explanation of how to make the Raspberry Pi the train cam?
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually pretty simple. I don't have anything printed. But
I think it's just that 3D piece that's sort of the custom thing. But
right. I've gone through about 4 different versions trying to find the right mix of how to do it. But I can certainly put the file up there for the one that I'm using right now, which, you know, this is just simply a cell phone power cell, power bank. You can buy those for like $5, and then the Pi itself is like $6. The camera is the most expensive thing, like at $20.
If you can send me the details on that, I'll include that with our write up on the OPSEG page, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's see. So we got a bunch of questions. You are the brakeman when switching. Instructions for dispatcher does control signals and power switches.
Yes.
Why do the train operators need to see? Well, that's a good question. Burr Stewart's question, why do the train operators need to see anything other than the camera car in front of the loco? It's like, well, the camera car is a recent addition, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, Burr, you're correct. You really don't need to.
But what my operators do like is if they're switching or they're backing,
Yep.
they can refer to one of those cameras on Zoom. Basically, if the area that they're in, they go right to that Zoom window and they pin it so that it's nice and big. And now they can see the tail end of their train as they're backing.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah. Again, we're taking people out of the room,
right,
and we're putting them in a virtual environment. So I just think it's another great tool for people to feel comfortable in this remote environment.
Yep. I think you really have to think about the minute you can go to a camera car, then you really start having to think about, okay, what about your signage along the route? Because I remember when I ran that passenger train, there was a very clear sign indicating this is the station. Now, as the train's pulling up, I would almost need like an along the line sign to say stop here,
right.
so I could, because I can't see behind me. I think you really start thinking as a real train engineer when you start doing that. I think it's amazing. So Thomas Gazier is asking, could you use just a remote dispatcher and all in-house crew? Yes, I think you said
absolutely.
you had done that before.
Well, I actually got the idea from Dave Abeles because
when
I operated on his layout, I mean, his dispatcher, like I said, I think he was in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh somewhere.
Yep.
And it's great. The other thing I think real quick is, once we're out of this COVID situation, I mean, this has practical applications for, afterwards. I mean, if you're having an op session and it's bad weather and some of your folks don't feel like they want to travel, they can call it in. And if the layout is still configured for that, you can quickly switch over and activate that remote op session or function for a few of those, operators that just can't make it, but they don't want to miss out.
Yep. I'm looking, I love the idea of the camera car. I mean, that I think is really that's really the ultimate, way to let the run through trains work and give you that extra level of operations. You let the people, when you get to the point where people can come back to the house and so on, let them run the locals, let your dispatcher be remote, let your way freights be remote, and I think you can multiply how many people you've got there. So
right.
Can OBS manage cameras connected by Ethernet? OBS can pretty much do anything you want.
OBS is really designed for gamers who are playing games and they're live streaming to YouTube or whatever, and it's all in-house. So
there was a great podcast called Hansel Minutes where they interviewed the guy who came up with OBS, and it was just like he just wanted to stream his gaming, and now he's got this, essentially it's turned into this phenomenon, and they used it for the NMRAX presentation. So can OBS put a fast clock display on the camera feed?
If you have a camera, or
you could probably put it on the JMRI screen too.
You could do that, yeah. There's a couple of different ways you could do it. So the answer is yes. Yeah,
you basically would just have another camera focused on the clock there. So could the camera rig be built into a diesel A unit dummy and pushed by a B unit? Probably.
Right, and understand, guys, that this is just my test. It's ugly. It's my test version. If these things are working really well, one of the things I'll probably do is use the deep well car as a template to build a locomotive, a hollow locomotive car. And the other thing is it's Dave Falkenberg is using a juice box, which is a battery piggybacked on top of a Raspberry Pi. And I've just started a discussion with him. And the reason that's kind of important is it can kind of even compress the size that I need further so that I might actually be able to get it into a dummy locomotive.
Yep.
And that's
Yeah.
perfect.
Right. But like I said, you know, I mean, there are some Roco brand locomotives that actually have the cab. I mean, they actually have it built in. I mean, it cost you an extra $100, but this is definitely coming. So
Right.
right now it's sort of the ability to do the the 3D printing really opens up some options there. So
Absolutely.
all right. Well, I think that's all the questions. Seth has a link up there about the Andrew Deeks Fast Clock, which will work with remote browsers, and just lots of nice compliments. So, Bob, appreciate you presenting. Thank you very much.
I'm happy. If it helps you guys out, that's what
Yep.
the whole point of this thing is.
We've had lots of questions about it. We talked about it in the open forum, and this is, I think, so far, I mean, even compared to Dave, I think you've got more hardware than even Dave did. So, in terms of being able to watch the trains everywhere, so we'll call you the front runner right now in the remote ops game.
Well, I'm following behind a lot of people that are farther down the tracks than me, but I don't hesitate to reach out, ask questions, and it's just a learning experience, and that's part of the journey. That's what makes it fun, is you just keep learning and trying a few things, and trial and error. Maybe that train cam can't get through that tunnel, and you got to look and you got to say, oh, I got to redesign my bracket, for clearances.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and especially since, this isn't going away anytime soon. I mean, it's going to be a while. I mean, we're doing some local sessions here where everybody's masked up, but that all depends. That's a really large basement. I would not want to do that in a, small enclosed space. It's just not, unfortunately, it's just not safe, especially given the average age of most model railroaders is well into the danger zone for COVID. So
right. But plus, you have your own family to consider.
Exactly.
What are they comfortable? What level are they comfortable with? And so, out of respect for them and everybody else, this is why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it.
Exactly.
Everybody gets a chance to run. They have fun for a couple of hours, and and we're all safe.
Exactly. So, again, thanks, Bob. And I'm going to stop the recording now.